Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today to join the Designlab UX Academy Alumni Spotlight. My name is Rudy. I'm a member of Team Designlab, and I'm joined today by Mary Cornfield, who's here to share a little bit about her experience going through UX Academy and what she's been doing since then. Couple really fast notes, and then I will mostly be quiet hopefully for this chat. I wanted to give you a couple of quick little introductory things. First and foremost, we are recording this webinar. I will include a link at the very end of the session. It will be available on YouTube, so I'll make sure to put that in the chat, and you'll be able to have access to it later. Share it with anybody that you know who wasn't able to attend live today. A couple other quick things. If you haven't done a live storm webinar with us before, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a chat section, and next to it also a questions tab. So it would be awesome if you could just say hello really fast in the chat. Tell us your name, where you're tuning in from today. If you're already in a UX Academy or Designlab course, let us know. If you are just interested in finding out more about UX UI design, tell us why you're here. That'd be awesome. I'm joining you from Grand Rapids, Michigan today. So while you're all saying hi, we'll kind of wait and see if anyone else shows up. One other thing to mention is that questions tab, you can go ahead and throw a question in there anytime as we're going. We would love for this session to really be directed by the things that you're most interested in finding out about. So I'll ask Mary, if you don't mind just giving us a quick little introduction. Say hi, tell us, let's briefly who you are, and then we'll kind of jump in.
Yeah, so hello everyone. I did the UX Academy about 3 years ago now. I am currently the co-founder of Capitan, which makes software for climbing gyms to make it easier for them to manage their day-to-day operations.
Awesome.
And I'm in Denver, if I didn't say that. And I saw someone was in Denver in the chat.
Love it. I saw another Michigander in the chat. That's awesome. Cool. People looking to learn more about UX design, some people who are just about to get started with UX Academy. That's awesome. People from across the US, across the world. Awesome. Okay, so excited to have you all here. Great. Well, really quickly before we jump into any specific questions about your story, Mary, I also, for the folks who haven't experienced any courses with Designlab, just wanted to make sure everyone knows that Designlab is an organization entirely focused on helping people turn their passion for design into a successful career in the UX UI industry. We have a bootcamp program, which is the one that Mary went through and we'll be talking about. And we do also offer a couple of short courses. If you have any questions about our programs, definitely let us know. Drop a question in the questions tab, and I'll make sure to put some information in the chat before we finish up here today too, so you know how to reach out for more info. But let's get into it. So really quickly, could you just tell us, Mary, before you joined UX Academy, what were you doing previously, and how did you first find out about UX UI design, and what sparked your interest?
Yeah, so my whole career, I've worked at different startups, and so started in kind of operations, sales type roles. Was at a 5-person startup, so technically I was doing customer engagement, but when there's 5 people, you kind of do everything. And so we were doing a whole redesign. It was online estate planning. They'd come out of Y Combinator. And so we're using this design firm up in New York, and someone on the team had to be the point person to work with this design team, and it just kind of fell on my plate. And so, I was doing user interviews, with our customers, figuring out what they liked, what they didn't, because I was interacting the most with them. And would kind of pass it on to this firm up in New York, and they would come with these beautiful mock-ups and these prototypes. And I was like, their job seems really, really fun. I can't do that yet, but I would like it. And so ended up in then a sales role. And I don't know if anyone here was in sales or has a sales background, but I say they're actually really similar to designers. So a good salesperson, you interview someone, you try and find their pain points, what are they actually telling you, what are they not telling you. The difference is at the end of a sales call, I have products that other people have built that I can cobble together and give to them. A designer can actually make a new product. So I knew I wanted to get into design. I was working at this company that was super supportive of people moving around the company, with their careers, what they wanted to get into. And so I didn't want to leave that. So that was a big thing. I didn't want to go to one of these full-time boot camps, because having a job, I was learning so much, just, actually working still with customers, also not having to give up a paycheck was really nice, and kind of the two things. So when I found Designlab and being part-time and being able to still have my full-time job was really appealing. But then the other part was like having mentors and someone actually keeping me accountable, someone that I can actually like talk to, get their feedback was something important as well. And Designlab kind of ticked all the boxes. I forget what it's actually called. It's like intro to design or one of the intro classes to like see if it was what I was looking for first. Really enjoyed it and then signed up for the full academy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And can you talk a little bit about your process, like in terms of why you chose Designlab specifically, or were there things aside from the part-time aspect and the mentorship, were there other things that were really like important to you in that process?
Those were two, and just like the caliber of the mentors was really impressive to me. And like I really loved my first one, and like talking to some other people, it sounded like all the mentors across the board are really strong. And then also the group aspect of it too. If it was going to be virtual, like still being able to like, bounce ideas off of not just that one mentor, but other perspectives, other people kind of going through similar things. So kind of, again, that nice balance where like the virtual part of it let me do it on my own time because I was still full time, but still having that support network around you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think a lot of people who are looking to take a course with the Designlab are in a really similar position where they have a full-time job and they are looking to continue working and also doing a boot camp part-time. And I think often are, a little bit concerned about the time management or just the feasibility. So could you talk a little bit about what your experience was like working full-time and also being a part-time UX Academy student?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging at times, especially when like work gets busy. I think something that helped me a lot, particularly because I had support and I was really open with my company about I wanted to move into design. They were really supportive of it. I actually used my company's like learning education stipend to pay for Designlab. But because of that, I was able to like carve out like lunch for Designlab essentially. I was remote beforehand as well. So, they knowing that I was in the course and like my manager and I had a really good relationship about it. It wasn't that I was like doing less work by any means. It was just like I could carve out an hour a day. I could just like stop everything and like focus on Designlab. So that helped a lot just to feel like I wasn't always working like really long evenings. And sometimes it's hard to like find large time chunks to do it all. So that was one thing that helped me. And then I kind of made a game of it in that I decided like every Saturday I would try a new coffee shop in Denver and like just like park there and just like get through all my work that I need to finish for that week. So like those are two things that helped me.
I love that. I love that idea too, because when you know that you're going to be devoting a significant amount of time outside of a full-time work week, it can feel like, I want to still have time for me and time for social life. So the whole like, let's find a new coffee shop every weekend is a way to feel like you're still getting out and doing things.
Yeah.
So that's an awesome strategy. I love that. Okay, so like, can you talk just a little bit about when you were in the boot camp? Like, what were some of the things that really stood out to you? What were your favorite parts, least favorite parts, or like biggest struggle? Things that maybe you didn't expect that kind of took you by surprise while you were in the program?
Yeah, so I loved the group crits, like seeing from other people like in like the same boat as you and kind of in a similar space. But was also cool is when you'd see someone that was like only a few months ahead of you and just like how much better their work was by that point because they'd already learned so much. So that was always really exciting. And then just like, yeah, the conversations with my mentors, they're still mentors to this day. And like, I still talk to them all the time. So the connections with them, not just even about like the design and the work, but just like the longer term aspirations of like, what do I even like do with this afterwards? Like, what am I doing with my life? Like all that kind of stuff. I loved and like still tap into. Things that surprised me, like in a negative way. It is a lot of time. Like, there's no way to like sugarcoat that. But I think looking back, it was all worth it and happy, that I took that investment.
Gotcha. Cool. That's awesome. And we talked a little bit about time management. Did you notice a difference in your time management from when you maybe started the program to then when you were done with UX Academy and actually were out like working as a designer? Like, did you see any sort of like translation of skills, more the soft skills that you developed during the course?
Yeah, I think I got better at like boxing time, kind of like I did at lunch. So just like devoting time to it. I think also, particularly, I'm sure a lot of people here, like you can go down so many rabbit holes and just like trying to find like the optimal design and like you can just, waste a lot of time. And so what I still do is I'll like time box something I'm working on. So it's like at the end of 2 hours, it's like what I have is what I have. Like I can't go back. Like we got to like move on. And so I think that mentality, that almost like sometimes done is better than perfect, or, perfect is the enemy of good. Like both those things, I think, when you have such limited time and also like you want to get back to your life because this is a part-time thing, that helped a lot.
Gotcha. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Did you start implementing that like early on in UX Academy, or did that take you a while to like develop that ability to just put something down?
Yeah. I think it definitely, like I still work on it to this day. Because I think, you always, as a designer, I think you can do it better. Like, right. Like how do I make it a little bit better, a little bit easier, like a little bit clearer. But then sometimes, like my co-founder now, he's a developer and he's just like a very logical person. He's like, it's fine. It works. Like we'll be doing something like, we have this like feature where you can merge 2 customer accounts. It's like, it's never going to come up on a demo. No one buys the software because of that. It's just like something that like you have to be able to do. And I was like going back and forth on like the design of it. And he's like, Mary, like no one's going to see this. Like, it's just so irrelevant. It's going to be like, come up once in a blue moon. Like, is it fine? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. So like, we can move on. But yeah, it is always, hard and tricky. But I think I've definitely gotten better over time.
That's awesome. I'm really curious. So the Designlab, like curriculum teaches a very specific workflow in terms of the holistic UX design process. How much of that did you find to be relevant in your, working life? How much have you adapted that workflow? And like, can you speak at all to kind of, similarities and differences in what you learned and what you've been doing on the job?
Yeah. So I think sometimes it does go back to that time is a really big limiting factor. So I think, if in theory, I would always love to go through the entire process of like doing all these really in-depth, user interviews and like, for every feature, like in theory, that would be the best way, and doing usability testing for every feature and like going back and doing this reiterative process. But sometimes you just like need to ship things and like they need to get out and you have deadlines. So I think it kind of goes back to that what we were talking about before. It's like sometimes you need to find like, where can I like skip a few steps? Cause like I'm pretty confident, like I kind of know, and like also priority wise, like if this is, our, golden feature and this is like what we're, our new thing coming to market, of course you want to go through that whole process. But it's like, if I'm adding like just a little piece to something that's been built for a long time, like, do I really need to do like that whole user research process in the beginning? In an ideal world, probably, but like realistically, no, like my boss needs it tomorrow. So that I think is just kind of balancing time and like developers' time and like your PM's time. You don't always have the luxury of as much design time as you would sometimes want.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So you're working, it sounds like, with a pretty lean team. Can you talk a little bit about, just like the day-to-day, what your kind of core responsibilities are and how you're working collaboratively with these other roles?
Yeah. So right now, at my company, it's just me and my co-founder. So very lean, just the 2 of us. So kind of where we divide the work, he's a developer. So I would say without him, it would just be mockups and Figma, not do anything. I do a lot of the interviews. So like, we were a new company. So it actually started as my Capstone project, but so it did start through the exact Designlab flow. But constantly talking to like customers that we already have, potential customers, again, kind of balancing that, like sometimes we're selling, sometimes we are learning from them and just trying to understand how we can make better features and products for climbing gyms. So a lot of my day is talking directly to our customers, like getting their feedback. We officially launched about a month ago. So like getting feedback from them on like what's working, what isn't working, like how can we make things better? Like a big thing for climbing gyms is they have a huge volume. So how do we just check in people as fast as possible with like as little, like how much can we have them do beforehand before they get to the gym? Because lines just get really long. And then obviously COVID, you don't want people like grouping at the front desk. So just always trying to find that process because it is so core to the whole experience for like staff and then also for their customers. So spend a lot of time with that. And then also like talking to our gyms about like what we want to be doing and like not just tomorrow, but like 3 months, 6 months, a year. So doing those like higher level, like discovery type calls, like understanding their like future needs and like what we can get to eventually. Like creating mock-ups, getting their feedback. So kind of all of it just depends on the day a little bit.
Yeah. So you're definitely in a position where you're wearing like all of the kind of smaller hats. The UX umbrella, doing everything from really high level strategy, analytical, all the way down to the like, selecting a typeface.
Exactly.
Awesome. That's super cool. So you started to touch on a little bit how, your current company began as actually a capstone project. I have a feeling this is going to be something that people listening are going to be really intrigued to learn about. So do you mind just like telling us, start with like kind of where the idea came from, how it came to be a capstone project, and then like what your trajectory was as you completed UX Academy and kind of what the next steps were from there?
Yeah, so the Capstone Project, for anyone that doesn't know, is like you come up with an idea essentially from scratch and like use everything that you've learned across the academy for this new product. And so I had worked at a company called TeamSnap, which does online sports management for like 25-ish million users. So like streamlining operations, all of that. And I was living in Colorado for a couple of years at that time. Eventually joined a climbing gym because in Colorado you have to if you want to keep your friends. And like I went and
you live there.
it's kind of a necessity. But I was terrified of heights and was like, fine, I'll try. And like it was just a very actually clunky process to like get started. So like signing up for an intro course was hard. Like it was just this whole back and forth and like couldn't really do it online. When I went in, the waiver was like super clunky and like kind of looked like it was made like 20 years ago. And then when I like finally decided like I'm going to be actually a member, not just do this course, like they gave me a paper form. I was like, what? Like this is just bananas to me. I'm sitting in this beautiful new like multi-million-dollar facility and I was like, maybe they're just like behind or something, or I don't know. And I looked into it and like most climbing gyms were using the same software, like 70 to 80% in the US. So kind of like dug in and like taught. And so for the project, I was like, maybe there's something here that I could work on and kind of use my past experiences. So interviewed climbing gym owners all across the US. I remember my mentor saying like, reach out to like 100, like maybe 10 will like fill out this little survey and like maybe 5 will get on the call. But I forgot to take into account that like climbing gym owners like love talking about climbing. So I ended up talking to like 40 and I was like, I don't have time for this. But it was really useful and happy I did. And it was pretty consistent across the board. Like no one liked this platform. It was clunky. It wasn't fully cloud-based. Like it only worked on PCs. Like it was just a very bad system. Like the first tab within it is data entry because nothing was done automatically. And so I was like, why are you using it then? Because this is just garbage. And it really came down to like climbing gyms have like specific enough needs that no other fitness software worked. And while this one platform didn't do anything particularly well, it did everything they needed. So it was kind of this like they were just stuck with it and never felt like they had options. So worked on that, like created this little prototype. One gym in particular I'd been talking to was like, and when I had interviewed them, was like, yeah, we've been like looking at other platforms because like we're really tired of it and just like want to see what else is out there. So I sent them my prototype at the end. I was like, just would love your like final feedback, like just curious what you think, and also what did you end up going with, because would love to know that too. And they're like, well, looks great, like literally exactly what we're looking for. We actually decided like nothing actually fits what we're looking for, so we're gonna like use a developer and build our own. And so that's when I was like, I'll put on my sales hat again. I was like, you don't want to start a software company. I don't want to open a gym in Pennsylvania. Like, why don't we work together? And they're like, great. I was like, cool. Crap, I need to build it. Like, I can't do that. And so that's when I brought my co-founder and then was working on it as a side project, had a full-time then design job at TeamSnap because I moved there and was kind of working on it part-time. Then like, with COVID, everything kind of got shaken up. Like half the company at TeamSnap was furloughed. I was part of that because design, unfortunately, a lot of us got furloughed. And so I was like, well, do I like finally go full time on this project, or like, do I look for another job? And decided to, finally take the plunge about a year ago and go full time.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I wanted to circle back to one of the things you said.
Yeah,
you need to build it. So I just pulled in my developer friend. Like, can you talk a little bit about that process of like, how did you go from, like a prototype and having identified kind of like a unicorn little niche industry where there was a clear need and nobody was filling it.
Yeah.
Like, how did you, I guess, like mobilize to take advantage of that quickly?
Yeah. So I think that's, where this like sales background is helpful. I always say what, makes people really good at sales, or what sales does in life, is it makes you very immune to rejection because you're used to people rejecting you like all the time. And before that, I'd worked on political campaigns. So like, you can't say anything mean enough to me. Like if you ignore me, I don't care. If you're mean to me, whatever. Like I've heard it all before. So like cold outreach is something that helps all the time in sales and also in design. Like all those gyms that I'd reached out to, I had absolutely no ties to the climbing industry. Just like reached out randomly and was like, hey, I'm a design student, would love to talk. I still reach out randomly to people all the time, like for various different needs. so that skill is kind of how I found my developer. Essentially, I reached out to my network and I was like, so I had this prototype. Jim is interested. They would like it. I need to build it. I need a developer. So I was like, does anyone know a developer that like might be interested? And thankfully the like overlap between like Climber and like software engineers like very large. So there's a lot of people interested. And so yeah, just like talk to, a bunch of people or like kind of interviewed them. And like what I really liked about my co-founder is I think there's kind of like two kinds of developers. There's like the developer that like at the end of the day is like, it works. And like, that's like their checkbox. Like it's fine if it can work, they're good. But why I ended up bringing on my co-founder is he, I think, still has that very like user side of him, making sure that it is a good experience for them. Like he cares about the UX, like, has his own opinions and like will bring it up and like is willing to like put in the extra effort sometimes to like make it a better experience. So, had kind of that nice balance. So yeah, that's why I brought him on.
That's awesome. That's super cool. I want to kind of keep asking some questions and also just encourage everyone who's watching. I am not ignoring your questions over in the questions tab. I kind of wanted to like get a quick little like intro, get into some of the meat of Mary's story, and then hopefully be able to pivot over to some of the questions that you all are asking. So I see we have a couple that have accumulated. I see some upvotes on a few of them. So we'll definitely dive into those in just a second here. And if you have any that are lingering in the back of your head, go ahead and start throwing those over in the questions tab. We'll pivot over there in just a second. But I did want to also ask you to talk briefly, Mary, about when you were just finishing UX Academy. It sounds like your first role after having finished the boot camp was not your own product. Can you tell us just a little bit about what that experience was like in terms of graduating the boot camp, looking for a job, or continuing in your role at the startup that you'd been at previously? Like, tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so kind of like I already said, like I was very open with my company that I wanted to move on to the design team. So it was like kind of known that even though I was in sales, I wanted to move into design. So one of my other Capstone projects, the one where like you have to make a feature, I think it's like for an existing product. Yeah, it's been a minute. So for that one, like I used the company I was at, TeamSnap, and had like talked to a couple of like PMs and designers. I was like, is there any like little thing that either like is just like not a high priority for you, or like kind of almost more out there, and so it's like not going to be again a priority anytime soon, or just like kind of small and you can like just pawn off to me and I can just like give a first stab at it. So that was how I picked that one. And then like what, got feedback from like my coworkers and stuff on like the correct teams. So like had that piece that, was a pretty nice portfolio piece to go back to my current job and be like, look, I built something for us. The other people at the company already said they needed that they like, and they gave me feedback. So kind of worked with them for a while to like figure out how we could figure out a design role, and eventually did get an entry-level design role at the company. So that's how I moved in there. And kind of back to, I think, that like piece I talked about, how like in an ideal world, you have a lot of time to do things and then you actually start working. That doesn't happen. The piece that, is really interesting when you start working is like, now it's not just like designers making decisions. It's like also your PM and also the developers and like also the sales team and like also marketing. Like there's a lot more cooks in the kitchen deciding like what gets built. So like figuring out the balance of that, was really useful. And I had a bunch of senior designers that kind of like took me under their wing to like guide me through some of those conversations and like, tell me like this developer is going to try and like nix all of the features. Like they're going to try and do as little as possible, and all that stuff. But yeah, that was my first role.
That's awesome. Do you think that experience has been useful or beneficial now as you've started your own company and are going to like hopefully be able to grow it, to like have that experience of seeing how a slightly larger team prioritizes and makes decisions about the product and how they're expanding it?
Definitely. Yeah. It's like one of those things that, sometimes you have to like decide what customers are actually going to pay for. And so, people will tell you all of their problems in the world, or like everything they want solved. But if they're not going to pay for it, then it's like, why am I going to design the solution? If like, that's going to be a lot of my time, it's going to be a lot of developer time, a lot of everyone's time. So I think that balance of like figuring out like how big of a problem really is it, and like seeing their propensity to pay for it in other ways, like then it's like an interesting thing to build. Like we always had the example, like customers at TeamSnap would always like ask for carpooling because like that was a big problem for them, or they said big problem. And we're like, well, how do you do it now? And like they figured it out and it was fine. And we're like, would you pay for a feature to do that? And they're like, no. And it was also wildly complicated because it's like a huge logistical like challenge. So like, well, we're never going to build that because it's just like, we could spend a lot of time and energy, but it's not going to benefit the company in the long run. And so that's, I think something, the ethos that we take into my startup now is like, a lot of people ask for features. Like we get feature requests from like our friends, like that are climbers at the gym. Like, could you do this? Could you do that? I'm like, I could. Are you going to pay me for it? And they're like, no. I'm like, cool. I'm going to go back to what the gym wants, who's actually paying me. So I think it's just like finding that balance.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super interesting insight. I'm going to switch over here because we've gotten some upvotes on some of the questions that are coming in through this questions tab. So Jay has asked, was it or is it difficult getting an entry-level designer position with little to no experience? So I think you touched on this a little bit about kind of your transition, but can you talk about from your position where you were looking to move within the same organization? Like, was there a lot of friction? Like, how challenging was it? How long did it take for you to do that role?
Yeah, so it was definitely like an ongoing conversation for a long time. I didn't just like spring it upon them. And so when I was in the academy and like when I finished, I didn't immediately move into a design role. It was probably like a few more months. So in that like transitional period, like I just tried to take as many little projects as I could from like coworkers on the design team to like, try and add value wherever I could. I was like, I have all this time in the world now. Before I was devoting 20 hours a week to Designlab. Like I can do 3 hours a week on little projects for you. So, it started like just taking those little pieces to like get more, experience under my belt. And actually my mentor had like made the really good point when I was like trying to get a job there. It was like justify, again, kind of back to that dollars and cents thing. So like identify problems that like you see and how your like solutions to it, like from your design idea, don't just like make it a better product, but also can like make the company more money. So it's like, whether that's streamlining things, and we can grow faster, or it's like a feature that people have been asking for, kind of going at it that way was really helpful in the long run.
Yeah, like making the business case.
Yeah, exactly. Not just like, I'm a great designer. It's like, I'm a great designer. That will also like, there will be an ROI if you put me onto the design team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Allison has asked, without a large team, I assume you have to problem solve a lot on your own. Are there resources you find helpful when you hit a technical or design problem?
Yeah, so that goes back to just being really open to like reaching out to everyone. So like going into like my friend network of like people at other companies, reaching out to them, but also like I reached out to like random people on LinkedIn all the time, or just like random gyms. And just kind of knowing that, to your point, like you can't do it on your own, and like there are things where you need other people's opinions. And just because they're not like on your actual team doesn't mean they can't or don't want to help. Like people love talking about themselves and their experiences, and like love thinking that they're helping another person. Like it's a very big ego boost. And so like very few people like are mean, never, like, or they might ignore you, but like at the end of the day, who cares? But like having a very targeted request too, it's like, I'm reaching out to you because, you're at Strava and like you did this really well. And something like we've been thinking about for like climbing. So would love to like pick your brain for 15-20 minutes if you have time. Again, most people say yes, and like it's super valuable, like keeping it to that 15-20 minutes, but kind of knowing what questions you want to have answered at the end of the call.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So Dana says, former climbing gym employee here. That's awesome. Maybe she has used that clunky software.
Probably.
Dana says, the climbing industry has a diversity problem, and recently there have been efforts to make climbing more inclusive and accessible to BIPOC. Did this play a part in the research and design of Capitan, and if yes, how so?
Yeah, so it comes up all the time with climbing gyms. To your point, climbing has a very bad diversity issue, and I think a lot of gyms know that they need to improve it. So two kind of feature things that we've talked about, kind of what we always say is like Capitan can't build community in a climbing gym because, for someone like Dana, like, the climbing gym community kind of is that special beast, but it's like, how can technology like help with their efforts that they're already doing? So like two little things that we're doing there are, one, like when you buy a membership through Capitan, a feature that we'll be rolling out kind of in the fall timeframe is you can like tack on a donation to a lot of these really cool organizations, either local or national, working on diversifying climbing and giving more people access, because it's kind of both of those issues. And then the other one is adding like a space for affinity groups. I've walked into a climbing gym and it's me and like 50 men, and it's not the most open space. I can't even imagine if I wasn't white how isolating that can feel. So making sure that people within the platform have a place where they can connect with other people, like see when they're meeting up, talk to them and feel like they have that support group going into the gym.
Yeah, and at least like find one climbing buddy.
Yeah, That's all you need, right? You just need one person to play you.
It's
And it's a sport that I think, once you get over those hurdles, it challenges you in a mental and physical way that no other activity really does. So we just want to make sure that everyone's first few experiences, they do feel welcome and find that community for them.
That totally makes sense. I had that experience. I did rock climbing to fulfill some like physical fitness requirements when I was in college. Because I always enjoyed rock climbing, and there was a gym right downtown, you could get credit for school.
Yeah.
Right. But the reason I got really into it was because I had one other friend who was doing it with me, and we would go together. And so you wouldn't be alone. So that's awesome to see how you're using design to kind of help, address some of those. Some of those sticking points. Awesome. Cool. Let's see here. The questions are getting upvoted, so they're moving around. Lena says, I want to make a career change to UX design, and I'm still looking for the best way to do it. What would you say made you go for the part-time online boot camp, aside from getting to keep your job?
Yeah, so the keeping the job, obviously a big piece of it, but also having that company that I could be talking to about real design problems. So I was already at a tech company that we had a design team. So by, still doing this part-time, I could ask them also for advice, on just class projects, but also, had this network of, designers that were working on problems that I was very familiar with, the way that you eventually become once you work at a company long enough. So we could go into the more real in-depth design issues that were faced by TeamSnap. So having that was it turned it in from just classroom conversation to real life. And so even just the little conversations on Slack, when, I would be, because I was still on the sales team when I was going through the academy, and I'd get to a feature and I'd be like, have we thought about maybe doing this a different way? It's kind of clunky, and just having quick little conversations, either about, something as tiny as iconography and certain areas to full on things wouldn't it be cool if we could in 3 years, because I keep hearing this from people when I'm demoing it, was just really beneficial. And I don't know that I would have gotten that if I wasn't part-time.
Yeah, awesome. Being able to kind of just immediately apply and bounce around the ideas that are in your head. That's really cool. You had that kind of structure for your experience too. Cool. Nicole has asked, how was the transition from operations to product in your startup company, and what advice would you give to those moving within companies? My company is also supportive of my transition within the company, but not really sure what to expect. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really cool when you find those companies. I think just start the conversations early and often. No one's going to be more passionate about you moving into design than you. So just knowing that you need to drive that ship, and figure out who, one day would make that decision if they're going to hire you or not is really important. So I quickly kind of figured out who at the end of the day is going to decide does Mary Cornfield get a job on the design team, and told him my intentions, I want to move into the design team. And then I think also coming at it with a very humble, attitude, because you have no skills at that point. This is what I want to do. I think this Designlab course, I've heard things. I think it'll be good. I think at the end, I'll be a good entry level designer, but what do you need to see from me in that, 6-7 months that this makes sense? And what can I be showing you along the way? So I was meeting with him once a month, just for a quick 30-minute call, kind of tell him what I've been working on, get his feedback on stuff that I was working on in the class, and just keeping communication open with him, and just kind of keeping him in the loop, and knowing what milestones do I need to hit for him to be able to hire me as a designer.
Were there things that you took then from those open conversations with him that you were able to incorporate into your mentor sessions, or did they help inform some of the decisions that you made as you were going through UX Academy?
Yeah, it helped me pick so for that Capstone project I did, where it was a feature that was from TeamSnap, my would eventually be manager was the person that helped me pick that feature. So it was these are kind of 3 areas, after talking to other designers, or 3 or however many it was, my own research, my own experience using it as a salesperson, that I think would be good to do this Capstone project on. But what to you is the most interesting, and where do you think I should actually devote my time? Because I'm going to do this Capstone project, might as well do it on something that we could actually use one day. I don't want to just make this pretend. So he picked that one, the one that I ended up doing. So that, guided that. That was what I showed them at the end of my course too. So got feedback from lots of different directors and things around it. So yeah, kind of having that constant communication, and then like going back to my design lab mentors and being like, so this is the one he picked, so we can't change that because this is like what he wanted. So we need to make it awesome because this is what he wants me to work on. And again, just having that like open communication and like, from their perspective, because they'd already done the like, working with PMs and directors and all of that, like what should I be like calling out of this design to him in those meetings? They're really helpful at.
Yeah, of like almost helping you kind of like practice your pitch or like
because
presentation.
Yeah, the pitch is like sometimes like I have other friends that design, they kind of think like the work speaks for itself, and it doesn't. Like you need to talk a lot because like good design is just really simple, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind it. Or the final product can look really simple, and so knowing how to like what to pull out, and like again, people have different things that's interesting to them. Like someone on marketing and sales has very different interests than like the design lead. So just knowing how to like tailor what you're talking about and what you are highlighting to whoever you're working with.
Yeah. Would you say that you already had like quite a strong or well-developed skill set in that regard, like before joining UX Academy from your sales background, or is that something that you also developed like throughout the course of the project of being able to like explain your design thinking and like present your design solutions?
Yeah, I think sales definitely helps. Like it's all you do all day long is like trying to figure out what motivates people. But I think like from Designlab, it just gives you almost like this, extra area that you can like tap into to like make I couldn't have made the argument to like the design team before, like why they should do something. I'm just like, people want to buy it. Like, I don't know, like it would be better. Or like it would be better being like my, defense of my ideas. And so giving you this like whole other like language to talk about, I didn't have before Designlab, and like that was what I was really lacking. So not just making like the business argument, but like the design argument as well.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's awesome. Cool. Let me just scroll through here and see what other questions we've got. Oh, cool. Okay. I think we've tackled all the ones that people have asked so far, but luckily I have some more questions waiting. So I'm just going to keep firing them at you if that's okay.
Cool. Yeah.
And anyone who's watching, definitely like stick more questions over there in the questions tab because we'll definitely have time to get to them. Let us know what you want to hear more about. Cool. So you've talked a little bit about how you have, background in sales and also before that, like working on campaigns. So you're good at dealing with or well practiced at dealing with rejection. Can you talk a little bit about if you've ever experienced any feelings of like self-doubt or even like imposter syndrome and like how that may have like affected both your time in UX Academy, maybe your time now starting your own company, like how you've experienced those things and then kind of how you've been able to work through them?
Yeah, all the time. You always have it, and I don't think they go away. And if anyone has a silver bullet to fix that, that would be great.
Put it in the chat. No.
Yeah. The thing that I think motivates me is like sometimes I'll be having these days where I'm like, this could be better, or like I don't know that I made this. Like you kind of go down that roller coaster of like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't know why I'm here. Like whatever it is. But the thing that like always makes me feel good is like going back and talking to our customers because they're much less hypercritical of design decisions than you are because they don't know what design and UI and all those things are. And that's what like keeps me going is like when you actually go back and see like features that you've released that in your mind like could have been better, or like again you're just always hypercritical, but then you get like an email from a customer being like, this new thing you rolled out is like changing my life. Like this is great. Like okay, the button placement doesn't matter. It's good. It's working. Like we've made that final decision. You need to move on. And just getting feedback from people actually using it, not even like another developer, not another designer. It's like the customers, the people like using it in and out. If they're having a good experience, then like at the end of the day, then it's almost like my ego that's getting in the way of saying it could be better. Like they think it's good, so like it should be good enough.
Gotcha. Do you get a lot of that positive type of feedback, or do you find that you're mostly hearing the like, these are things that we wish that this product would do?
I mean, you get both, but I think, it goes to that like open communication early on. Like our customers know that they can give us feedback. It's not like I'm precious with it. Like I love it. Like I want you to tell us what we can do better. But I think, the way we develop anything is like, it starts right, like with a user interview, like where you're understanding like what they need, what they want, how things have worked for them in the past and how they want it going forward. Like we show them designs and then we build it. So like by that point, like I'm pretty confident that like what we've built is like not going to be like a complete, garbage feature. Like it's kind of what they wanted.
Yeah.
I think where you get into your head is like, you always think it can be better and like always striving for that like perfection thing. But knowing that like, yeah, again, perfection doesn't exist. And like, if you solve their core problem, a lot of like those are like minute details kind of fade away. And I think whenever I get to a point where I really don't know, is this going to solve their problem? Well, that's when I just have like another conversation with them. Like usually the things I'm fussing about are like really minor in the long run. Or I would have hopped on a call because I would have wanted more clarity.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Cool. Yeah. And it's nice to get those like pats on the back and
yeah.
feature
I mean,
change.
there's definitely, and there's stuff that, we're a startup, like we haven't built yet. And I think it's, again, just like telling them what's coming and like giving them realistic timelines. And, that's where maybe sometimes more the sales side comes in. But I think, a lot of people are nice inherently and like really happy when you're like helping them. And like, they love feeling like they're part of the product. Like they're helping shape it and like we're really responsive to what they want. So even when we do get like an angry email or like one that's like not as positive, it's, kind of an opportunity for us to make it better. And often this happens in sales, it happens in customer support, it happens in design. Like that like angry email, if you like fix it, then that person like loves you. You go from like 0 to hero so quickly. So it's like a good, way to think about it is, it's always good in the long run.
Yeah, that's true. We've had a couple more questions come in here. So Amanda says, UX Academy has a lot of helpful features like the coursework, the mentors, the portfolio projects, etc. What do you think was the most valuable feature or like aspect of the learning experience that you took from the course?
Yeah, so I mean, my Capstone Project helped me start a company, so that was pretty big. But those mentors, I think, are just really helpful because, like, a lot of the UX like information is like out there online, right? It's not like Designlab's teaching us anything like completely new. Like it's a lot of other courses, but it is that like mentor feedback and like helping you stay accountable and just having those conversations about, actually like, what I read online, like how to actually do that in life. And so those mentors are great. Like both of them came when I like did a pitch competition for my company. They're like, we talk all the time. Still, because I think just having those people in your network that are like, have made it in a way in design and like you can ask questions and are super open to talking and continuing that conversation. That's what's been really beneficial for me.
That's really cool to hear that they're there still kind of like supporting.
Literally also, again, because, be humble and you'll get better from what you are in UX Academy. Like one of my mentors is like, it's crazy how much better it looks now. And I was like, ouch, a little bit, but
yeah, how much
you're not wrong. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about in terms of your mentor relationships, were the people who were your mentors during the boot camp was their design background or their design experience at all similar to what you've ended up doing, and like how did you learn from mentorship through someone who, like I doubt that at the start of your UX Academy journey, you said like, I want somebody who's like an avid rock climber and who's like started their own company for me, because that's my long-term goal. Like how did you learn from someone whose design background was dissimilar from yours, and like in what ways was that like beneficial or not in your learning journey?
Yeah, sometimes the dissimilar aspects are like way more beneficial, I think, because it just makes you think about something in a different way. So like if I only talk to people at startups, like I would never have structure in my life because startup people are the least structured people in the world. And then like my good friend is like a director at Salesforce, so like the opposite of like a startup, like has the most like well-tuned, oil machine for like a tech company. And so like hearing how she does something, I'm like, well, I can't do all of the processes you have because I don't have a team and that would be dumb, but like I can take a little pieces here and there. So my mentors, one actually had started companies randomly. So he kind of did have, I think, sometimes that more like scrappy mentality about it. Another one was at like a very big company, so the opposite. And again, I think it is always like finding that balance and like knowing when you need to be a bit more scrappy, like the startup inside, and like when you need to like sit down and this is important, like this requires more work or more like processes around it, and just kind of digging in a little bit more. So yeah, I learned a lot from both and still talk to both.
That's awesome. And did you have one mentor in that like intro course and then one throughout UX Academy? Is that kind of how you're?
I had two, I think, in the UX Academy.
Okay. So you had one in,
right? Yeah.
and then one in
yeah,
Facebook.
all blurs together. It's like a whole thing, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. For people who are watching, like you can definitely stick with the same mentor through the entirety of UX Academy, but sometimes students will also choose to switch when they're kind of at the halfway point between phase 1 and phase 2. And often, it's just because they're interested in gaining another perspective on, their design skills. So that's awesome. So kind of keeping in line with mentors, Amanda asked a follow-up question. What were the best ways to utilize the time for your mentor sessions in terms of topics and guidance?
Yeah, so I think it's something I still sometimes struggle with today. Like when you get on a call, like what do I want to get out of it? And I think what I like try to ask myself before I get on a call with a gym or like I get on a call with like, again, someone I've just reached out to like pick their brain is like, what can I get from them that I can't get from Googling like a little bit harder or like talking to anyone else? Like what very specifically can they share with me? And so I think starting there is good. Or also then like sometimes, with a mentor, I'm like, I don't even know where to go. Like I'm so lost. Like I don't even like pinpoint me, like just narrow it down, like what I should be doing. I think that's what like Designlab mentors in particular are really good at because they're working with everyone that doesn't know what they're doing yet. That's why you're in the academy. So they can sometimes just like guide you and kind of like, narrow you into like a good thing to focus on. Was really helpful.
Yeah. I think that the idea of like preparation is also like a skill that you can develop too.
Yeah.
Like trying to be really intentional of like what you're looking to get out of something and like being really like maximizing the time that you have on the call.
I like for every call, I always have like, what I want to like talk about and like what I want to get out of it. So it's like the questions that I need to have answered by the end of the call, like to know that call was like a success essentially. So it's like, it can be a tiny thing, right? I just need to like pick the date of our next call. It can be like, I'm deciding between these things or like, and sometimes you don't fully answer it, but you know what you have to do to get to that answer. But having an agenda, like, love an agenda.
Were you did you create agendas? Like, was this a thing, a habit that you had prior to?
It's a very salesy thing. It's like very like set the agenda, like set what you're going to do, like kind of set the next steps. And I think, it's very helpful, like in any kind of meeting. And it just post Designlab too, it makes you very professional. Like you set the agenda at the beginning, do it, and then like recap next steps. Like everyone loves you. So, and then do it in an email.
Follow up. Everyone has access to the info. Yeah, it's a definitely like like a designed process, but it makes a lot of sense. So that's awesome. Yeah, great tip for maximizing. Doesn't matter what you want to talk about, just like about it beforehand. Cool. So we have another question from Suzelle who asks, do you have any networking suggestions for newbie UX designers such as myself?
Yeah, so I think it kind of ties into what I was just saying is when you're reaching out to people, like tell them why you're reaching out to them specifically. So don't just like the generic, like I'm a design student would like love to talk to you. Like that's not very helpful. So like I'm a design student, I'm also based in Denver. I saw you've been working at, I don't know, Slack for 3 years on like the team. And like, I think this feature at Slack is really cool. I don't know if you worked on it or not, but like would love to pick your brain, like make it seem personal and not like you were just copying and pasting. And then that person, like, again, you just like flatter the shit out of their egos. Sorry, but you're not supposed to curse on these. And so like, they will almost always respond. Like, it's hard not to. And particularly like, I mean, we've all been on LinkedIn and you just get like the barrage of the like clearly copy and paste things. Like when you see that one that someone took, it doesn't take long, it takes 5 minutes of like, digging a little bit into their LinkedIn. That customized like outreach will just like reap rewards. And talk to as many people as you want, like widen the net, but make it specific when you're actually reaching out to them.
That totally makes sense. And I feel like that's really great advice, not just in networking, but like as people go through into the career services phase and this idea of like applying for jobs. I know that wasn't your trajectory. It wasn't quite as, linear in that direction, but this idea of like quality over quantity, or like not necessarily reducing quantity, but making sure that if you're going for the quantity approach, that there's also that quality and that you've taken the time to really like research and, and personalize the kind of outreach.
And a great way to end calls too is like, after you had like a good call with someone is like, who else should I be talking to? Like, which is just a good way, like for sales. It's a good way for like, when I talk to a gym, I'm like, who else could I interview about like that's also having a similar problem that like, in your network, when you're looking for a job, same thing. So just kind of keeping that conversation going.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great tip too. Okay. We need to be like writing these down, like the intersection, like how to use sales techniques to make you a better designer.
Yeah. Everyone should do sales for a little bit. It's great. Or customer service.
On that, write a blog post. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. We've got a couple other ones that came in. Let's see. So Shelby says, you mentioned you took the foundations course. I don't know if it was our Design 101 or the UX Academy Foundations is kind of like our
101.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Design 101 used to be our prerequisite course for UX Academy, and we have now like iterated on it. So the current prerequisite is called UX Academy Foundations. Do you think you came out of that class with a strong understanding of the design and feeling fully prepared? Asking as someone who has zero design experience.
I think it was like a teaser. So it was like, I think I want to go into the design. Like, I don't know if I want to commit like months and months like to doing this yet. So like, let me just like see a little bit, like more than just like Googling it and talking to people. So it was like kind of just like a sanity check to make sure I really did want to get into design. And I felt like after it, like I could like balance course load, because that was also another concern. Like, am I going to be able to like do this? And so like doing that, like again, doing projects that I'm like, no, these are actually interesting, and like this is what I want to be working on. It was a good like, okay, I'm ready to like, bite the bullet and like go on to the longer academy.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And just a little additional context there, like the Design 101, you would have had like 4 weeks and 4 mentorship sessions. So definitely a little bit more of like a bite-sized snack.
Yeah.
In Foundations is, more content, up to 8 weeks, up to 8 mentorship sessions. So a little more involved, but definitely still a great way to do the sanity check that you talked about. Like, I can commit the time. I'm really interested in this area. And like, now I have some understanding of some UX design tools. So I'm like ready to hit the ground running. Yeah.
It's kind of the way I thought of it. It's like, I don't know if anyone does Peloton here, but like one of the instructors I really like always says like, when we're doing like strength ones, like you can do anything for 20 seconds, right? Like you can do it. Like, don't think you like have to stop in 20 seconds. And so I was like, I can do it for a month. Like I can do anything for a month. And so yeah, even 2 months, right? Like that's not too long. You can try it out and see where it goes.
I think that's a really key skill too, of like, anytime you're taking on a large endeavor, whether it's like an hour-long Peloton class or, like a, 3.5 to 6 month boot camp or something, like when you think about the big picture, it can get overwhelming. So being able to just like break it down into smaller chunks and think like, okay, what's just the next thing that I need to do? Like, what's the next item on the list? What's the next, like, milestone that I need to achieve?
Yeah. And like, I know friends that are like self-taught designers, but I could never have done that. Like because to me, I was like, I don't even know how you become just like a designer. Like, what does that even mean? Like, it's so nebulous, and like, there's so much out there, but that's why I love like Designlab. It was like, we'll like break it down into like little bite-sized chunks of like how we're going to get you to be a designer, and like have people like telling you like, this is the path, like this is what you're doing, like, just made it a lot more manageable.
Yeah. This is the path. No, you've strayed from it. Come back.
Yeah. Come back.
Or like go your own way. But
yeah. Make sure you end up at the right destination.
Totally. Yeah. That's awesome. Cool. We've got a couple more questions coming in here. I do want to let everyone know that we have just about, now it's 6 minutes. I was going to say 7. We've got about 6 minutes left in our conversation with Mary. So if you do have questions, drop them in the chat. We'll try to power through these last couple ones before we sign off. So Jay says, are there good design courses to take that don't involve coding or development? I've been trying to learn web design, but the tutorials I've been watching also discuss coding. Is UX design similar to web design?
So I can't code. I took like one intro to web development class in like high school and got to like unordered lists and CSS, and that was about it. So I think they're just like completely 2 different skills. I remember like that was one concern I had, and like talking to a mentor, because I was like looking at some job postings, and like some people would require both, and he was like, that's a very, very old school way about thinking about them. Like before, it was thought that if you're a developer, you should also be a designer, and like designer was not even really a different profession. And so people that like have that mentality probably have a very old school way of thinking about product in general. And so he was like, yeah, I would just like run away from that company in general, because they don't know it, like it's not where you want to be, and it's not going to be a good learning environment. And I think, I have a tremendous respect for my co-founder who like is a developer, but like we just have very different skill sets. And like again, we collaborate all the time, but like stay in your lane for certain things. Like sometimes we'll joke he does developer art, like I didn't make a mock-up something and we're like, interesting place to put buttons. Like why did we do that? Or like, is there a reason we just like made it bold? Like that was an interesting design choice. So again, it's just like using different parts of your brain. So I think where I think it does help some people is they understand the technical limitations of like certain pieces of it. So like a lot of conversations I have with my co-founder and at TeamSnap with developers too would be like, you know, in an ideal world, like I want the design to do this. It took me 30 seconds in Figma to do that. And they're like, that's really complicated. Like you don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. So be willing to like adapt to when they do have like legit development concerns is really important, but I don't think you actually like really need to know a lot of it. I've gotten by.
Yeah. Awesome. And just wanted to throw out there that like we don't teach coding in UX Academy because it definitely, you know, it's not a requirement to be UX UI designer, but we do cover a little bit of content about like how to you know, package up your designs and be able to hand them off to a developer, knowing
that's important.
like be able to work collaboratively and have a conversation around the design. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and it is funny. My friend that's a designer too at TeamSnap, we used to always joke that like sometimes when you're going to a developer, you're like, this is going to be really hard, and I'm like, so sorry, and you give it to them like that's going to take me like 30 seconds. And then like you'll be like, can we change it from green to red? And they're like, you have no idea how hard that is. You're like, what? Sometimes I'm still sometimes just like flabbergasted by like what is hard and what isn't. But you like learn over time kind of and start to kind of understand like where they're coming from.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Ray, I wanted to just call out that I saw that you also posted a question related to knowledge of coding languages. And I'm going to skip over it because I think we just kind of addressed it just for the sake of time, but definitely not trying to ignore your question. Thanks so much for dropping it in here. Okay, let's see. They keep rearranging themselves. Dana, any tips on time management or staying on track? What are 3 things you wish you knew while you were in the program? That's a great question.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned the ones that worked for me. So like trying to like just like set time every day to do it. I think weeks where I would like let a day or two slip, that's when my weekends are pretty miserable. So trying, even if it was just like 30 minutes like before work, just like trying to do something and like get it started was always really helpful. So that was one. Like time boxing like lunch or like you know, taking little like breaks of it, because sometimes like trying to like sit down and do like 8 hours of work on a, you know, Saturday is like hard, but like finding little, you know, time when you can do it and like fit it in was helpful for me. And then if I had a third, I don't know if I have a third one. I feel like those are the 2.
That's all right.
Sorry, Dan, I only have 2.
Awesome. Then Hardwick says, after the foundations course, did you know that you would enjoy and be good at UX design?
I know I'd enjoy it. I think I knew I had a lot to learn still. But I was like, I think I'm on the trajectory that'll one day make me a good designer. Again, I think it's like coming to that humble side of things. Like you are going to leave this like an entry level designer. Like your senior designers have been doing this a long time and are very good. Usually like they've been doing it and like you have a lot to learn from them. So I think whenever just coming in with a humble attitude, like knowing you still have a lot to learn. But I did know at the end of like the academy, like, yeah, I'm happy I did this. Like I want to move on to the design team and had the potential to become a senior designer one day.
That's awesome. Cool. Okay. Well, we've kind of reached the end of our allotted time here today. I want to be really respectful of your time, Mary. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing, you know, your experiences, insights, tips, and tricks. Thank you, everyone who jumped on, for asking all of your questions, for being so engaged. I'm going to drop just a couple of things here in the chat. Some links, first of all, to where you will be able to access this video on our YouTube channel after it's posted. Definitely subscribe to our channel so you can get notified for you know, when this link goes live, when we have other upcoming events. You can follow us on Designlab and Twitter, and stay tuned for like other things that are going to be going on. So there's some info there. It's going to get lost in the chat. Everything. awesome. You guys have been great. I did also want to just throw an email address in here. So if you are interested in finding out more about our courses, definitely please reach out. We'd love to chat with you. I'm one of the members of the admissions team, and we're always here to help answer questions. So definitely get in touch by reaching out to admissions there. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day or night, depending on wherever you are in the world.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.